Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Continue reading from from Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 3, Chapter 33, Text 35. Aste Yogam Samastaya Sankhya Charya Abhishutataha Abhistutaha Trayanam Abhilokanam Upashantaye Samahitaha. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Even now, Kapila Muni is staying there in trance for the deliverance of the conditioned souls in the three worlds, and all the acharyas or great teachers of the system of Sankhya philosophy are worshipping him. So does anyone remember where did Kapila Muni, where did he go? Yesterday we read.
Kapila Vaikuntha?
I'm sorry?
Is it in the Vaikuntha there is one more dham name as Kapila Vaikuntha?
Kapila Vaikuntha, yes, that is where Mother Devahuti, she went there.
Okay.
After she left her body. But Kapila Dev, after he left home, he went to Ganga Sagar at the Bay of Bengal. You know, he traveled, he left his home, then he went to the Himalayas, following the course of the Ganga. And then again he came down to Bay of Bengal and he made his bhajan. He's doing his bhajan there. Well, not bhajan, because he's the Supreme Lord himself. But anyway, he is still there. Now we may say, okay, I want to go see him. Oh, but I can't see him, so he's not. So what happened? We have to see. He's the Supreme Lord. Are we qualified to see him? But the personalities who are qualified to see him are able to see him. So that's why it is said that, and all the acharyas or great teachers of the system of Sankhya philosophy are worshipping him. So he's there and the great acharyas are there worshipping him. Etan nigaditam tata yat prishtoham tamanagaha kapilasya cha samvado devahutyascha pavanaha. My dear son, since you have inquired from me, I have answered, O sinless one, the descriptions of Kapila Dev and his mother and the activities are the purest of all pure discourses. So Maitreya Muni has been saying this to Vidur. You know, that was the Maitreya Vidur Samvad. Vidur was asking Uddhav for transcendental knowledge, but Uddhav said that Maitreya Muni is nearby in Vrindavan, so better you go to him. And then Maitreya Muni started speaking the story of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. And inside this story, he gave this great knowledge of devotional service, which begins by hearing and chanting. And so within this story, he showed Vidur how practically one can engage in devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead. Ya idam anushanoti yo abhidhate Kapila Munir matam atma yoga guyam Bhagavati kritadhi suparnaketa upalabde Bhagavat padaravindam. The description of the dealings of Kapila Dev and his mother is very confidential. And anyone who hears or reads this narration becomes a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's carried by Garuda, and he thereafter enters into the abode of the Supreme Lord to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So this is what Srimad Bhagavatam is. Always giving us benedictions that simply we are hearing. We are simply reading or we are simply hearing and giving us the highest benediction that we can go back home, back to Godhead, revive our love of God, become a devotee of God. It's not an easy thing. But Bhagavatam is saying just by hearing Bhagavatam, we can get this Shruti Phala. It's called Shruti Phala. And just by hearing, we are getting this greatest benediction. Imagine becoming a devotee of the Supreme Lord, then go back home, back to Godhead, and what do you do then? Engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the eternal activity of the soul, of every soul. The narration of Kapila Dev and his mother Devahuti is so perfect and transcendental that even if one only hears or reads this description, he achieves the highest perfectional goal of life, for he engages in the loving service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no doubt that Devahuti, who had the Supreme Lord as her son and who followed the instructions of Kapila Dev so nicely, attained the highest perfection of human life. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purpose of the third canto, 33rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Activities of Kapila, end of the third canto, Jai. So this brings us to the end of the third canto, brings us to the end of Kapila Shiksha, and shows us how Mother Devahuti got perfection by engaging in devotional service. And we got this great benediction that we can become a devotee of the Lord, we can go back home, back to Godhead, and engage in pure, loving, transcendental, loving service to the Supreme Lord. Would anyone like to add or comment on anything? So we can see, the Supreme Lord and the devotees are so kind that they are giving us this benediction. You just simply hear this pastime. These pastimes of Bhagavatam, they are not ordinary material pastimes. It's not like we open the internet, oh, the current news is this, he's doing this, she's doing this. Those are just current material news. That's not going to take us back home, back to Godhead. But Bhagavatam is pastimes of the Supreme Lord, pastimes of his pure devotees, and just simply by hearing it, we can go back home, back to Godhead. This is Bhagavatam. So we should get attached to the Bhagavatam, give Bhagavatam to others, so everyone can go back home, back to Godhead. Bhadra Purnima is coming up on 10th September, and Bhagavatam says that anyone who gives or receives Bhagavatam on the Bhadra Purnima goes back home, back to Godhead, and gets love of Krishna. So if you all have the opportunity, then you all can kindly distribute more and more Bhagavatam, connect more and more people to Bhagavatam. So that brings us to the fourth canto, the creation of the fourth order. I'm grateful to all of you for this reading, that we were able to complete the 3 cantos. And so we begin the fourth canto, chapter 1, Geological Table of the Daughters of Manu. So the conversation is going on between Maitreya and Vidur. Maitreya Vacha Manostu Shatarupayam Tisra Kanyascha Jajniri Akutir Devahutischa Prasutir iti Vishrutah. Sri Maitreya said, Swayambhuva Manu got 3 daughters in his wife, Shatarupa, and their names were Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. So in the previous canto, we heard about Devahuti. She is one of the daughters of Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu. Manu is the father of mankind. There are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma. So this we are hearing about Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarupa. And they had 3 daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. So, in Bhagavatam, as we read along, we are going to come across a lot of names. There'll be so many names, and we'll wonder, oh, what's happening? What's happening? But we have to understand that these are great personalities, and that's the reason that their names are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. They are worthy of being mentioned, and that's the reason they are there. Yeah. It's not like reading some mundane news. First of all, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, by whose order I am engaged in this Herculean task of writing commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam as the Bhaktivedanta purports. So here Srila Prabhupada is offering his obeisances unto his Guru, unto his spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. It was the desire of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master that Srila Prabhupada can give the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the English-speaking language. And so Srila Prabhupada, he spent endless nights, sleepless nights. He barely would sleep, not caring for his personal comfort, to translate this most valuable scriptures for us. And he's calling Bhagavatam Herculean task. Why? Because it has 18,000 verses. And Srila Prabhupada is translating, not only translating the verses, but he's giving his commentary. And Srila Prabhupada's commentary, the purpose, how is he giving? Because he's reading the purports, the commentaries of the previous great acharyas, Sridhar Swami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He's not just making up anything. He's following the previous acharyas. By his grace, we have finished 3 cantos already, and we are just trying to begin the 4th canto. By his divine grace, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Caitanya, who began this Krishna consciousness movement of Bhagavad Dharma 500 years ago. And through his grace, let us offer our obeisances to the 6 Goswamis, and then let us offer our obeisances to Radha and Krishna, the spiritual couple who enjoy eternally in Vrindavan with their cowherd boys and damsels in Vrajabhumi. Let us also offer our respectful obeisances to all the devotees and eternal servitors of the Supreme Lord. So Srila Prabhupada here is teaching us the etiquette that we cannot approach Radha and Krishna directly. We approach them through the parampara, through the spiritual master. We approach them through Lord Chaitanya, through the 6 Goswamis, and then to Radha and Krishna. So, and also Prabhupada is saying respectful obeisances to all the devotees and eternal servitors of the Supreme Lord. So this is Vaishnava etiquette. In this 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 31 chapters, and all these chapters describe the secondary creation by Brahma and the Manus. So the secondary creation is called Visarga. Sarga is the first creation which is done by Mahavishnu, and the secondary creation is Visarga, that is by Lord Brahma. The Supreme Lord himself does the real creation by agitating his material energy, and then by his order, Brahma, the first living creature in the universe, attempts to create the different planetary systems and their inhabitants, expanding the population through his progeny like Manu and other progenitors of living entities who work perpetually under the order of the Supreme Lord. So it is the service. This is the service of Brahmaji to populate the universe. He has to, because we living entities are there. Yeah, we are put inside the universe by Mahavishnu. And now Brahmaji has to put us in different universes based on our desires, our karmas. He has to give us different bodies, place us in different situations. So it's a very, very important service he's doing for Krishna. He has to place the planets where which planet is going to go where, which living entity is going to go where. And he has to, that's how he starts doing the secondary creation. Secondary creation. In the first chapter of this fourth canto, there are descriptions of the three daughters of Swayambhuva Manu and their descendants. Then the next 6 chapters describe the sacrifice performed by King Daksha and how it was spoiled. Thereafter, the activities of Maharaj Dhruva are described in 5 chapters. Then in 11 chapters, the activities of King Prithu are described. And the next 8 chapters are devoted to the activities of the Pracheta kings. So Srila Prabhupada is giving us a preview of what is to come in the 4th canto. There is this great sacrifice by Daksha. Daksha is one of the Prajapatis. He was the father of Sati. He is the father-in-law of Lord Shiva. So it's a very interesting, these chapters of what happens between Daksha and Lord Shiva. And then we are going to read about Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj is one of the pure devotees of Krishna who got perfection. He was in desire of wealth. Krishna says 4 types of pious people come to me. Out of them, one of them is the desire of the wealth. So what was Dhruva Maharaj's desire? Does anyone know?
He wanted the kingdom bigger than his father.
That's right. Bigger than his father, bigger than his grandfather, bigger than his great-grandfather. His father is Uttanpad. Uttanpad is the son of Swayambhuva Manu, and Swayambhuva Manu is the son of Brahma. So Dhruva wanted a kingdom bigger than his great-grandfather Brahma. Then King Prithu is one of the incarnations of the Lord, Shaktiavesh Avatar, and he is the Acharya of deity worship. One of the angas of devotional service is worshipping the deity, and King Prithu is an example of that. And then the other 8 chapters are devoted to the activities of the Pracheta kings. I forget the Prachetas whose sons were they? Were they the sons of Daksha? Anyway, when we read, we will get to hear about them. As described in the first verse of this chapter, Swayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters named Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Of these 3 daughters, one daughter, Devahuti, has already been described, along with her husband, Kardama Muni, and her son, Kapila Muni. In this chapter, the descendants of the first daughter, Akuti, will specifically be described. So we are going to hear a lot of names and we will be like, oh my God, what's happening? But we simply hear. These are great personalities. That's the reason they are mentioned here. Swayambhuva Manu was the son of Brahma. Brahma had many other sons, but Manu's name is specifically mentioned first because he was a great devotee of the Lord. Manu is a devotee of the Lord. He's doing the service for the Supreme Lord. In this verse, there is also the word cha, indicating that besides the 3 daughters mentioned, Swayambhuva Manu also had 2 sons. So we'll continue reading. Akutim ruchaye pradad api bratram matim nripaha Patrika Dharma ashritya shatarupanu. Akuti had 2 brothers, but in spite of her brothers, King Swayambhuva Manu handed her over to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of her be returned to Manu as his son. This he did in consultation with his wife Shatarupa. So Akuti, one of the daughters of Swayambhuva Manu, got married to Prajapati Ruchi. And then Swayambhuva Manu told them that your son, you give it to me. So sometimes a sonless person offers his daughter to a husband on the condition that his grandson be returned to him to be adopted as his son and inherit his property. This is called Patrika Dharma, which means that by execution of religious rituals, one gets a son, although one is sonless by one's own wife. So he takes on his grandson as his, adopting his grandson. That is called Patrika Dharma. But here we see extraordinary behavior in Manu, for in spite of his having two sons, he handed over his first daughter to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of his daughter be returned to him as his son. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, so Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is one of the great acharyas in our line. He has written commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and Srila Prabhupada refers to these commentaries of the great acharyas. Srila Prabhupada's purports are not just some imagination. No, he's referring to so many different commentaries of the previous acharyas. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments in this connection that King Manu knew that the Supreme Personality of Godhead would take birth in the womb of Akuti. Therefore, in spite of having two sons, he wanted the particular son of Akuti because he was ambitious to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear as his son and grandson. So Swayambhuva Manu knew that the son of Akuti and Prajapati Ruchi is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And because he wanted the Supreme Lord to become his son, he told his daughter and son-in-law, you give me your son. Manu is the lawgiver of mankind. And since he personally executed the Patrika Dharma, we may accept that such a system may be adopted by mankind also. So Manu, he's the leader of the human beings. Manushya comes from the word Manu. Manu Samhita is the law book written by Manu, by which we are supposed to follow that. And we are supposed to live peacefully and happily in this world by following that Manu Samhita. And at the end of life, go back home, back to Godhead. So thus, even though one has a son, if one wants to have a particular son from one's daughter, one may give one's daughter in charity on that condition. That is the opinion of Srila Jiva Goswami. Srila Jiva Goswami is one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, the youngest Goswami, and a great scholar. He's written many, many commentaries. So, did anyone have any questions or comments to what we have read till now?
So, Akuti was the eldest daughter?
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what we,
right?
Yeah. Yes, that's what was just mentioned. Yes.
And they just mentioned about Devahuti because it was in connection to Kardamba Muni, and they were trying to tell about Kapila Muni there.
Yeah, Lord Kapila's, yes, because the whole Kapila Shiksha was there, you know.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
I think Swambhu Manu was a great, great man, as even Devahuti ji gave birth to Lord himself, Kapila Muni. And as it's also mentioned that Lord himself will come in the womb of Akuti also. So again,
yeah,
right? So that means that it's a great devotee's lineage. Otherwise, Lord will not be born to anybody just like that.
Thank you. That's right. Yes, thank you for bringing that to notice. Yes, Swayambhuva Manu is a devotee of the Supreme Lord. Yeah. We read that how after Devahuti's wedding, when Swayambhuva went back, Manu went back, how he was ruling the kingdom in complete devotion to the Lord, completely as a service to the Supreme Lord. So yeah, he's a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. Swayambhuva Manu, not an ordinary personality. We'll stop here for today. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much everyone for joining in today morning. Hare Bol.